Hi guys, we're going to talk about chapter 16, and this is socializing and educating staff in a learning organization. Educating staff and assuring continuing competency is critical and a difficult task. In this chapter, we're going to look at concepts of learning organizations and the various components of staff development. We're going to look at adult learners and their needs. We will look at coaching as a staff development tool. So let's get started here. When we hear the term learning organization, what does that mean? A learning organization is a place where people continually learn and expand their capability to create what they truly desire. This learning goes beyond the boundaries of individual learning, and it increases gains for the individual as well as the organization. The learning organization promotes a shared vision and collective learning in order to create positive and needed organizational change. A premise of the learning organization is that learning itself enhances the team. Organizations that incorporate lifelong learning as part of their philosophy will be more successful. Singe first introduced this concept of lifelong learning within an organization and created a model with 5 key characteristics. These characteristics include systems thinking, personal mastery, team learning, mental models, and shared vision. System thinking means the organization encourages staff to see themselves as connected to the whole organization, and work activities are seen as having an impact beyond the individual. When we think about personal mastery, each member of the staff has a commitment to improve his or her personal abilities. Team learning, it is through the collaboration of team members that learning organizations achieve their goals. When we think about mental models, a mental model is the set of assumptions and generalizations, or even pictures or images that influence how we understand the world and how we take actions. And then shared vision is when all the employees of the learning organization share a common vision. They are more willing to put their personal goals and needs aside and instead focus on teamwork and collaboration. The COVID-19 pandemic upended workplace norms worldwide. Even learning organizations faced unprecedented challenges in cultivating true employee engagement and reducing remote burnout. Learning organizations recognize that learning is a never-ending and have some responsibility for developing their employees through staff development programs. When we look at training versus education, these are definitely 2 components of staff development. Training is defined as an organized method of ensuring that people have knowledge and skill for a specific purpose, and that they have acquired the necessary knowledge to perform those duties of the job. So managers have to determine the training needs. Observation to identify deficits can identify training needs, or new implemented products can promote training needs. When we think about education, on the other hand, it's a more formal and broader scope than training. Whereas training has an immediate use, education is designed to develop individuals in a broader sense. Managers need to recognize educational needs and encourage educational pursuits and roles and responsibilities of leaders. Managers and education department staff have shared responsibility for the education and training of staff. If staff development activities are to be successful, it is necessary to delineate and communicate the authority and responsibility for all components of education and training. So there are a couple of learning theories that we're going to talk about. Managers must be familiar with basic learning theories because they are responsible for employee performance improvement through teaching. Understanding these learning theories allow managers to structure training and teaching techniques. The first theory we're going to look at is adult learning theory. Managers tend to teach with pedagogical strategies, which is ineffective for mature adult learners. Knowles developed the concept of andragogy to separate adult learners from those strategies they received as younger children and adolescents. Adult learners are mature, self-directed people that learn from life experiences and focus their problem-solving skills within their environment. This theory has contributed to a great deal in which adults are currently taught in staff development programs. Based on the individual needs, a combination of approaches may be required. To sum up adult learning, andragogy works well with those who have had life experiences because they are mature and they can take part in their own learning. They are self-directed rather than dependent. So what are some of the implications of Knowles' adult learning theory for trainers and educators? If adult learners work in an open and respectful environment, they are better to assist in identifying what the wants and needs are for learning. Adults enjoy taking part in planning their learning experiences. Adults should be involved in the evaluation of their progress, and we know that mistakes are opportunities for adult learning. If the value of the adult's experience is rejected, the adult will feel rejected. Adult readiness to learn is greatest when they recognize that there's a need to know. Adults also need the opportunity to apply what they've learned very quickly after the learning. And then assessment of need is imperative in our adult learners. And I think as you listen to each of those, you all are adult learners, right? So some of those implications should be applying to you as well as you've gone through nursing school. Adults take pride and joy in being treated as adults in terms of learning, but there are some obstacles to learning in adults that didn't exist as children. These obstacles include institutional barriers, time, self-confidence, situational obstacles, family reaction, and then just some special individual obstacles. Some assets and driving forces for adults that encourage learning include they're usually high self-motivated, they're self-directed, we've talked about, they're a proven learner, their knowledge experience reservoir, they've got a huge knowledge experience because of life, and then definitely just some other special individual assets. When we have referred to chunking as a learning strategy, remember this refers to presenting two independent items of information and grouping them together into one unit. Although the mind can remember only a limited number of chunks of data, experienced nurses can include more data in those chunks than novice nurses. So the example the book talks about, an experienced nurse will be able to recognize subtle changes in a patient's status based on assessment or changes in lab values, where the novice nurse may take a little longer to connect those pieces. Managers may not be involved in implementing educational programs, but they are responsible for identifying those learning needs. Learning needs differ with staff members, so assessment needs to be carried out before developing those programs. Staff development activities are normally carried out for one of three reasons. They need to establish competence. So competence is defined as having the ability to meet the requirements for a particular role. State board licensure, national certification, and performance reviews can be used as competency requirements. Other reasons include meeting new learning needs or to satisfy interests the staff may have in learning something in a very specific area. The sequence used in developing educational programs are identifying the desired knowledge or skill that the staff should have. So manager's initial action is to identify that learning need of the new nurse. Identify the present level of knowledge, determine any deficits, identify any resources that are available to meet those needs, make maximum use of those resources, and then evaluate those outcomes after using the resources. Social learning theory is also an important part of a learning organization. It's the other learning theory that we will discuss in a little bit more detail. This theory suggests we learn from our interactions with others in a social context. When we dive into social learning theory, social behavior is learned primarily by observing and imitating the actions of others and by being rewarded or punished for those actions. So what is that suggesting? That we learn from our interactions with others in that social context. Direct reinforcement does not account for all types of learning. Most people learn their behavior by direct experience and observation. This is known as observational learning or modeling. And then four processes involved in social learning. People learn through direct experience of their action. Knowledge is obtained through indirect experiences. People learn by judgments voiced by others, and people evaluate the soundness of new information by inductive and deductive logical reasoning. If observational learning is to become successful, individuals must be motivated to imitate behaviors that have been modeled. So I want you just to think for just a second. Have you primarily learned something by observation? What was it, and how did you learn from it? Other learning concepts that may be helpful for leader managers in meeting staff learning needs may include readiness to learn. That looks at the maturity, the experience factors that are influencing learning, meaning the learner has prerequisites for the next stage of learning. Motivation to learn. Is the learner advanced enough about the benefits of what they are learning and it's making them more motivated? Reinforcement. Good preceptors reinforce desired behaviors until the behavior becomes internalized. Task learning. Complex tasks are broken down into parts, beginning with simple tasks through complex tasks. It's necessary to combine part learning with whole learning when skills are being learned. Space practice is more effective than mass practice. Transfer of learning. This is transferring learning into the work setting, right? You guys went to nursing school, you learned something, and then you took it to the clinical setting. You're transferring that learning. Span of memory, chunking, we've talked about, right? Two independent items are presented, and we can group those together as one. And then knowledge of results. Evaluation of staff development is essential in making sure activities are effective. Criteria for evaluation include the learner's reaction. How did the learner perceive the orientation, the class, the training, or the preceptor? How about behavioral change? What behavior change resulted from the learning? Was the learning transferred? Utilizing a method to follow up to observe if behavior change needs to be implemented in the evaluation process. Organizational impact, measuring quality of care, medication errors, accidents, quality of clinical judgment, turnover and productivity. They can all be assessed to see the impact on the organization. And then cost effectiveness is another evaluation criteria. This can be most neglected aspect of accountability and staff development and needs to be quantified in some manner. Cost effectiveness does not imply cheap. It implies that the expenditure is worth the cost. Activities should be evaluated for quality control, impact on the institution, and cost effectiveness. One way a healthcare facility can demonstrate their commitment to becoming a learning organization is to promote and facilitate professional practice that is evidence-based, because nurses often find that barriers to evidence-based practice exists within organizations. Facilitating evidence-based practice is a shared responsibility of the professional nurse, the organization, the leader managers, and the education or staff development department. And when all of those are facilitated, increased patient outcomes occur. So what are some strategies for promoting this evidence-based practice? Develop and refine research-based policies and procedures based off of the practice on evidence. We can build consensus from an interdisciplinary team. This can be done through development of protocols, decision trees, standards of care, institutional clinical practices, etc. Make research findings accessible through libraries and computer resources. Provide organizational support, such as time to do the research and educational assistance. Encourage cooperation among professionals. And when possible, hire nurses or nurse researchers to consult to assist staff. Leader managers drive training and education, but they are also responsible for socializing employees to their roles and the organization. Socialization refers to the learning of the behaviors that accompany each role by instruction, observation, and trial and error. This involves a sharing of the values and attitudes of the organization. It creates a fit between new staff members and the unit by introducing them to norms of the group. The first socialization to the nursing role occurs during nursing school and continues after graduation. Numerous studies have shown a gap between the perception of educators and clinician nurse leaders regarding the adequacy of preparation of newly graduated nurse. These gaps in practice expectations provide ground for the new graduate to feel overwhelmed, conflicted, and frustrated, often referred to as reality shock. So we have to socialize our new nurses into the unit, into the organization, and sharing those values and attitudes so that their overwhelmed, conflicted, frustrated feelings are taken care of. Resocialization occurs when individuals are forced to learn new values, skills, attitudes, and social rules as a result of change in type of work that they do, in the scope of responsibility that they hold, or in the work setting itself. Another difficult transition is from the familiar to the unfamiliar. Special orientation materials should be developed and updated frequently to reflect current practices. Providing necessary staff development will promote self-esteem when new nurses are fulfilling new roles. It is important to remember that no one is immune to a loss of idealism and commitment in response to stress in the workplace. We have to work on ourselves, our organization, our leaders on burnout. When we think about role change and role overload, organizations often fail to address socialization problems that occur in job position or status changes. Role ambiguity describes the stress that occurs when job expectations are unclear. Role overload occurs when the demands of the role is excessive. As nurses move into positions with increased job status, job descriptions, they may become more general. Therefore, clarifying job roles becomes an important tool in the resocialization process. Decentralized staff development can include the conflict created by role ambiguity whenever two people share responsibility. And we'll talk about decentralized staffing in the next chapter. But just understand that role ambiguity can describe some stress, right? There's shared responsibilities that arise with onboarding, education, and training of personnel, which may have a lack of cost effectiveness, evaluation, and limited accountability for the quality and outcomes of the educational activities. So nurses moving into a position of increased responsibility can experience stress created by that role ambiguity. Clarifying those job roles becomes an important tool in the resocialization process. Strategies to promote socialization and resocialization is the use of role models, preceptors, and mentors. Each role has a different focus and uses different mechanisms. A role model is defined as someone who is unusually effective or inspiring in some social role or job and can serve as a model for others. Role models are experienced, competent employees. The relationship between the new employee and the role model is a passive one. The greater the number of role models available for new employees to emulate, the greater the possibilities for new employees to perform well. So think about your role model. Who is your role model? Do they know that they are your role model, right? It's usually a very passive relationship. So when we talk about preceptors, these are experienced nurses that can provide knowledge and emotional support. They can also clarify role expectations. They are active and purposeful with strong clinical skills. Preceptors will closely supervise the work of new employees without judgment. Effective preceptor role models adjust their teaching to each learner as needed. So they may precept you in one way and me in a different way. Preceptor programs have been initiated in some facilities to help identify experienced nurses that will fulfill a positive experience for new employees. Mentors take on a great role for new employees. Mentors develop a supportive and nurturing relationship between the experienced nurse and the novice nurse. This relationship can take 2 to 5 years to develop. Some individuals use the term preceptors and mentors interchangeably, but these assignments really play very different roles. Mentors take on this role because they choose to assist the protege in attaining expert status and furthering their career. Preceptors are usually assigned because they are experienced nurses with really great clinical skills. Many nurses do not have the opportunity to have a true mentoring relationship in their life, unfortunately. If you can find a mentor, hang on to that mentor. The mentoring process goes through 4 phases. The first phase is exploring whether to begin a mentoring relationship. So finding and connecting with a more experienced person in the workplace. Establishing a relationship where chemistry is present and fosters openness and trust. The second phase is negotiating a mentoring agreement with goals and deadlines. This includes teaching and modeling that promote a sense of competence and confidence. This phase is where the relationship can escalate because there's a foundation of mutual respect and understanding of each other. The third phase is implementing the agreement and periodically reviewing progress that's been made. The relationship begins the conclusion phase here. The mentee begins to move toward independence. And then the last stage is summarizing and formally concluding the mentoring relationship. Coaching is a relatively new term, and it can be used as a teaching strategy. Coaching is one of the most important tools for empowering employees, changing behavior, and developing a cohesive team. This is one of the most difficult roles for a manager to master. Coaching is one person helping the other reach an optimum level of performance. The emphasis on assisting the employee to recognize greater options, to clarify statements, and to grow. Short-term coaching is effective for assisting with socialization and dealing with short-term problems. Long-term coaching can deal with disciplinary problems. Socialization and resocialization difficulties occur because the employee lacks motivation to overcome challenges in learning a new role. Programs must be implemented to help correct these deficiencies by using positive and negative sanctions. Sanctions are the bestowing of reward and punishment used to show employees what behavior is rewarded or eschewed in an organization, and rarely carried out on a systematic and planned basis. The manager should know that the group norms are what the group norms are, be observant of sanctions used by the group to make newcomers conform, and intervene if group norms are not appropriate. And this slide just shows those group norms, which we've already talked about. When we think about meeting the educational needs of culturally diverse staff, we must be aware that learners with diverse learning styles and cultural backgrounds may perceive both the classroom and the instruction differently. We need to respect those cultural diversities and recognize the desirability. A solution to nursing shortages has also been to recruit international nurses. This does not create some socialization needs. Language skills are often a significant issue because of differing interpretations of abbreviations and American slang. There are also many differing interpretations of nonverbal behaviors that may further cloud communication problems. International nurses often experience cultural, professional, and psychological dissonance that may be associated with anxiety, homesickness, and isolation. And that concludes this chapter. If you have any questions, you can shoot me an email or we can chat about it in class. Thanks, guys.